chosen ones, they did everything they could to make you break, and they almost enjoyed it. The truth is, some people don't hurt you by accident. They hurt you on purpose, and then they wait. They wait to see you scream, fall apart, beg, or lose control. That's what they live for. Chaos, misery, shame. They set the trap. They throw dirt. They push your buttons. And when you don't react the way they expect, it messes with them in ways you can't even imagine, because you didn't give them the satisfaction. You didn't fold. You didn't explode. You didn't even flinch. You stood there in the middle of that disgusting situation, surrounded by rumors, betrayal, envy, and poison. And you handled it with calm, with class, with the kind of quiet strength that doesn't make noise, but leaves an echo they can't stop hearing. You weren't supposed to survive that level of disrespect. You weren't supposed to walk away with your mind intact and your head held high. They painted you as weak. They poked at your limits. They made a public scene and expected a public meltdown. Instead, you gave them something they weren't ready for. Stillness. That dangerous kind of stillness that says, I saw what you did and I'm not breaking. If this message already feels like your story, press the like button and subscribe. Not just to support this voice, but to return power to your own. Thank you for being part of this mission. This movement is growing because of you. And now look around. The silence after the storm is louder than the noise ever was. The same people who wanted to destroy you are watching from a distance, confused. The ones who lied on your name are whispering now, asking each other if you really knew all along. The snakes are coiled up quiet, not because they're done, but because they realize they failed. And what's worse than a snake who bites? A snake who bites and still loses. They say it takes less than a second for the human brain to snap in anger. But it takes a lifetime of soul development to choose grace in the middle of war. You didn't just stay calm. You taught a lesson without opening your mouth. That's not weakness. That's power. That's rare. That's what people don't know how to copy, because anyone can clap back. But not everyone can clap up and rise above filth without smelling like it. Some of them are now trying to act like it never happened. Others pretend they were on your side the whole time. A few are even studying your moves in silence, trying to figure out how you kept your cool when they know deep down they wouldn't have. That's what separates you from them. Not just how you handle success, but how you handle betrayal. Anyone can smile when things go right, but you smiled when things went ugly. You didn't need to raise your voice. Your silence said more than words ever could. You didn't need revenge. Your healing exposed them louder than revenge ever would. And now their little plan, it's backfiring. The attention they tried to steal from you is circling right back. But not as pity, as respect. Because real people saw what happened. Real ones watched how you handled it. And they're talking. This isn't just about one disgusting moment. It's about all the moments back to back where you were pushed to the edge, tested behind closed doors, and left standing alone while people laughed behind your back. And somehow you didn't let that harden your heart. You didn't become what they were. You became something better. There were nights where your chest felt heavy, where you had to walk away from people you loved because they stood and watched while others tried to destroy you. And that kind of pain doesn't go away easy. But you wore it like armor. You didn't post about it. You didn't blast it out to the world. You just kept going. And that silence, that patience, that's what made you dangerous. You're not here to be anyone's puppet. You're not here to be controlled, manipulated, or silenced. And what just happened proved that to everyone who was watching. They thought they could bury you in mud, but they didn't realize you were made for pressure. And now all the mess they created only helped polish your strength. Welcome, chosen one. Your story is not just powerful. It's proof. Proof that the universe never leaves real ones defenseless. Proof that calm is a weapon. And now people are looking at you differently because what you just walked through would have crushed most. But you made it out with your light still on and your dignity untouched. Let's break this down step by step, because what you did in that moment wasn't just impressive, it was legendary. And listen closely, chosen one. This next part is where everything clicks. If you've ever been wronged, lied on, pushed to your limit and still managed to stay calm when chaos begged for your reaction, then this message was crafted with you in mind. Drop a 777 in the comments if you've ever had to keep it together while the world tried to tear you apart. This isn't just a story, it's your survival manual. Your silence spoke volumes. And now the same people who mocked you are quietly applauding behind closed doors. That's real power. That's unshakable energy. And we're just getting started. So sit back, stay locked in, and feel every word that follows. If you truly are who you say you are, a chosen one, then your spirit won't let you click away. It'll lean you forward, heart open, ready to soak in the truth. Because what's coming next will not only explain why they're so impressed, it'll remind you exactly why you should be too. Let's break it all down step by step. Let's get into it. Number 1, they threw dirt. You built a throne. Now they choke on the dust. The most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who saw everything, said nothing, and still walked out untouched. They didn't expect you to survive. Let's get that straight. They didn't expect you to walk out of that disgusting situation with your soul intact and your mind sharper than ever. No, they wanted the drama. They fed on it. They set you up to snap, to sink, to self-destruct in public while they played innocent in the background. That was their plan. But here's what hit them in the gut. You didn't just survive, you rose. You handled every bit of that filth like a master chess player watching pawns play themselves into checkmate. And now they're stuck watching the replay in silence, wondering how someone who had every reason to fall somehow stayed 10 steps ahead. You didn't just walk through a mess. You made the mess irrelevant. That's the kind of control they can't stand. And that's why they're still whispering about you long after the storm has passed. Most people would have cracked. Most people would have taken the bait, the lies, the shade, the low blows, the betrayal. It was designed to provoke a meltdown. That's why they poked so hard. They needed you to react so they could feel better about their own failure. But you let them drown in their own noise while you stayed in control. That's what haunts them. Not what you said, but what you didn't. They can't stop replaying it in their heads. How you didn't scream when they tried to humiliate you. How you didn't run to defend your name when they covered it in dirt. How you stayed composed when all they wanted was to see you collapse under pressure. But instead of collapsing, you elevated. Instead of reacting, you refined. They expected mess. You gave them mastery. You handled that situation like someone who's seen this game before, like someone who knew this wasn't the end. It was the test. And while they were busy trying to stain you, they didn't realize you'd already cleaned out your circle, your soul, and your strategy. You were operating at a different level, a level where you don't just survive filth. You outsmart it without getting a single speck on you. And yes, it was disgusting. Let's not sugarcoat it. What they did was dirty. The lies, the betrayal, the fake apologies, the smear campaigns. It was personal and it was cruel. They wanted to watch you unravel. They wanted to laugh at your downfall. But what they got instead? Silence, poise, precision. You made them uncomfortable without raising your voice. You made them question themselves just by holding your ground. Here's the part that really drives them crazy. They thought you were weak. That's why they targeted you. They assumed your kindness was stupidity. They thought your calm meant clueless. They were wrong. And now they're realizing it too late, because the one they tried to break is the one they secretly fear. The one they dismissed is the one they now respect. Even if their ego won't let them admit it, you didn't just win. You exposed the whole game. Your restraint was louder than any outburst. Your peace was a weapon sharper than any insult. And your ability to walk away without mud on your hands. That's what made them spiral. Because now the spotlight they tried to steal is shining back on them, and it's revealing everything they hoped would stay hidden. They underestimated the power of self-control, of staying silent when every part of you wanted to scream, of staying clean when every trick was meant to make you dirty your hands. But you knew better. You saw the trap, and you didn't just avoid it. You made it collapse under its own weight. Now they're sitting in the mess they created while you've moved on to higher ground. That's what real strength looks like. It's not in the noise. It's in the discipline, the restraint, the long game. And that's what you played flawlessly. Every rumor, every setup, every fake friend they used to drag your name through the dirt only polished your character in front of people who matter. Now you walk with the kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself because everyone already knows. They hoped you'd be bitter. They hoped you'd turn cold, but instead you turned golden, quietly, elegantly, strategically. And that's why they're choking on confusion right now. Because when someone throws dirt at you, they expect you to throw it back. But you used it to build something they can't reach. Your throne, your clarity, your next chapter. And no, it wasn't easy. Don't let anyone tell you that strength like that comes without scars. Behind that calm was a battlefield. Behind that silence were nights you didn't sleep. But you chose growth over revenge, peace over pettiness. And now the very people who tried to stain your name are being forced to sit in the consequences of their own character. You didn't just walk through filth. You rewrote the whole meaning of resilience. That's why they're impressed. That's why they're rattled. And that's why they're still watching you from the shadows, wondering how someone they tried to bury came back stronger, smarter, and more focused than ever. They don't know it yet, but you taught them something. You showed them what it looks like when someone doesn't need validation to be victorious. You didn't need to prove them wrong with words. You did it with grace. You didn't need to fight back in public. You did it by healing in private. And you didn't need to get even because the universe already did that for you in its own quiet, perfect timing. They threw dirt, hoping it would stain you. Instead, it revealed them. Now the whole room sees the difference. And you're still clean, still rising, still dangerous in your silence, still the chosen one. Number 2, you rose without schemes, and now they can't stand the view from below. Real power doesn't scream for attention. It walks in uninvited and shifts the atmosphere. The loudest person in the room is often the weakest. The one being watched in silence, that's the real threat. They built ladders out of lies. You built one out of discipline. And now yours actually touches the sky. You didn't steal the crown. You became undeniable, and the universe handed it to you anyway. They can't wrap their heads around it, and it eats at them. In their world, power is dirty. It's traded like backroom deals, whispered about in gossip circles and built on the backs of betrayal. They had to claw for status, sell their values for visibility, pretend to be bigger than they are just to feel like they matter. And then you walked in. Not loud, not flashy, not trying, just real. And suddenly you became the one they couldn't stop watching. That's what truly scares them. You didn't cheat to get here. You didn't pull strings, step on next, or play games. You just kept showing up with truth in your tone and purpose in your presence while they were faking strength. You were becoming it. And now, without even trying, you've taken the kind of power they would trade their souls for. But here's the kicker. You didn't take it from anyone. You earned it. And that's what messes with their heads the most. Imagine this, a room full of performers, each one louder than the last, desperate to be noticed, faking confidence, crafting personas, chasing approval like air. Then you walk in, silent, centered, present, and the room shifts, not because you tried to dominate it, but because your energy was too real to ignore. That's what you do, that's who you are, and they felt it even if they pretended not to. They've spent years trying to engineer moments that look like success. You became success by staying authentic. They used shortcuts, alliances, and distractions. You used patience, discipline, and growth. They built images. You built impact. And now their whole idea of what power looks like is being destroyed in real time because someone like you isn't supposed to win in their system. But you did, and you're still winning. Let's be clear. You didn't gain power by stealing it from someone else. You didn't need to. While they were burning bridges for clout, you were quietly laying bricks for your future. While they were chasing applause, you were building character insolence. While they needed people to believe in a version of them, you became a version of yourself that couldn't be denied. And that's real power. The kind that doesn't just change rooms, it changes people. They're watching you now with a mix of awe and discomfort because it shouldn't have been you, right? That's what they thought. You weren't loud enough, weren't fake enough, weren't ruthless enough. But what they didn't see was how deeply rooted you were. They couldn't tell that while they were sprouting fast, you were growing strong. And now the storm came, and look who's still standing. Maybe you've wondered why people who used to ignore you suddenly act interested. Why those who mocked you are now mirroring your words. Why the ones who tried to dim your light now seem blinded by it. It's not coincidence, it's exposure. They spent years selling illusions, but you showed up with substance, and substance outlasts show every single time. Let's break it down. You didn't network your way into respect. You became respectable. You didn't beg for love or loyalty. You became lovable and unshakably loyal to your purpose. You didn't scream for recognition. You lived in such a way that even your silence spoke volumes. That's how power works when it's real. It doesn't have to push, it pulls. And now they're being pulled whether they like it or not. And oh, how the tables turned. Now they're sitting at meetings, quoting the same values they once mocked you for. They're pretending they supported you all along, hoping no one remembers what they said behind your back. But the truth is in the shift, and everyone can feel it. You didn't just gain power. You redefined what power is. You didn't just rise. You exposed every lie they used to justify their fake climb. Imagine someone planting seeds in private, watering them with consistency, protecting them from the noise. No crowd, no spotlight, just work, just growth. And then one day those roots break the surface and people act shocked. But it wasn't sudden. It was earned, that's you. Your growth wasn't an accident. It was inevitable. And now they're witnessing the harvest while theirs never came. They ask, how did you do it? You didn't, you became it. You became the kind of person whose energy speaks before you do. The kind who doesn't flinch under pressure because you've already survived worse. The kind who doesn't perform because there's nothing left to prove. You didn't wait for permission. You gave yourself approval a long time ago, and that's what really eats at them. You didn't chase power. Power came to you because real power is magnetic. It finds the ones who are solid even when no one's looking. And now the very people who once counted you out can't stop watching your moves. Quietly jealous, deeply impressed, and scared to admit how much they're learning from you. Let's be honest, they're confused. They did everything they were told would work. Kiss up, play politics, fake friendships, chase status, and yet they still feel empty. Meanwhile, you stayed real, and you're full of respect, full of purpose, full of influence that actually means something. Because while they were busy performing power, you're becoming the real thing. And that's why they keep your name in their mouths. Not to attack you anymore, but to understand you. Because somewhere deep down, they know what you've built can't be faked, can't be copied, can't be bought. It came from pain, from growth, from walking away when it was easier to conform, from trusting your path even when no one else could see it. You didn't just rise, you changed the rules. And now you're not just respected, you're studied, you're referenced. You're the one they tell others to watch closely because what you did and who you've become exposes everything they did wrong. And nothing's more threatening to a liar than someone who got it all by telling the truth. They'll never admit it, but you made it without them. You made it past them. You made it beyond them. And the best part, you made it without ever becoming them. Still the chosen one, still rising, still untouchable. Number 3, you walked through fire and didn't come out reeking of smoke. They tossed trash your way, hoping you'd throw it back. Instead, you built distance, walked away clean and left them sitting in their own stink. You can spot the sewage and still not swim in it. That's what separates leaders from reactors. Let's call it what it was, emotional filth. You saw the backstabbing. You heard the whispering. You felt the bitterness hiding behind fake concern. And still you refused to let it soak into your spirit. That's not something most people can understand, because they would have lost themselves in the chaos. But you didn't. You held your identity like a shield and said, "This mess won't change me." Imagine being surrounded by smoke and still choosing not to inhale. That was you. People don't realize how quickly pain turns into poison, how betrayal can stain your character if you're not careful. Most fall into it. They start mimicking the same behavior they hate. They throw dirt right back. They let the bitterness take root and grow. But not you. You saw the sewage and you stepped over it without letting even a drop cling to your shoes. You could have matched their energy. You could have dropped facts that would have flipped the entire room. You had truth on your side, and you had every right to strike back. But instead, you chose something most people don't even consider. Peace. You chose not to become the thing that tried to destroy you, and that shook them harder than any revenge ever could. Now people whisper when you enter the room, not because of scandal, but because of control. They remember how you carried yourself while being dragged through hell. They remember that you didn't turn cold, spiteful, or vindictive. You stayed grounded, clear, unbothered. That's what sets you apart. That's why they're still trying to figure you out. You didn't win by playing their game. You won by changing the rules. Your power didn't come from retaliation. It came from restraint. And now the same people who tried to make you look weak can't stop watching you glow. You saw the trash and still walked out clean. That's legendary. Number 4, they built a trap. You built a stage. The trap they set to ruin you became the spotlight they accidentally handed you. They tried to silence your voice. Now it's echoing louder than their lies ever could. Let's not twist this. They didn't just want you to fall. They wanted you to fall in front of an audience. This wasn't a petty insult or some harmless drama. It was a calculated setup, carefully crafted rumors, well-timed betrayal, pressure from people you trusted, all built to break you down and catch it on tape. They didn't want justice. They wanted a reaction, something they could point to, edit on replay. One angry moment, one emotional slip, and their whole campaign against you would have been complete. But you didn't take the bait. You felt the heat rising, your nerves stretching thin, your hands itching to respond. You knew what they were doing, and still you stayed grounded. You didn't scream. You didn't explode. You didn't give them the meltdown they were dying to see. Instead, you let them talk while you built. You let them lie while you learned. You let them think they were winning while you were becoming untouchable. Imagine this, someone digging a ditch for you to fall into. But you gather the dirt, shape it, and build steps out of it. That's what you did. You turned that setup into strategy. You turned gossip into growth, and that's the part that eats them alive. Their plot didn't just fail. It became the very thing that lifted you. They were counting on your collapse. What they got was your comeback. Now people look at you and see someone who rose above the fire without becoming bitter. They see someone who could have clapped back with the truth but chose silence over spectacle. They see someone who didn't seek revenge and still won. And the part they'll never say out loud, they respect you for it because deep down they know they would have folded under the same pressure. You didn't need to prove anything. Your progress did that for you. They tried to make you break. Instead, you built and now they can't stand the view from below. Number 5, you didn't shout for respect. You became the reason they fell silent. When you know your worth, you don't beg for a seat. You walk in and become their raise and the whole table shifts. Real power doesn't introduce itself, it lives, it moves. It glows and forces the world to adjust. They expected noise from you. They were waiting for an emotional rant, a long-winded explanation, a desperate attempt to be seen, heard, and understood. They wanted a spectacle, something to roll their eyes at and say, "See, we knew they were fragile, but you didn't give them that. You didn't plead your case because you knew the truth." Only the insecure performed for people who already made up their minds. You weren't desperate for recognition. You were too busy becoming undeniable. You never showed up to their invisible courtroom. You knew the trial was rigged anyway, full of people who had no intention of seeing your light. Instead, you walked away calmly, quietly, and then you lived out the very thing they tried to deny your worth. Imagine walking past a crowd that doubted you, not with words, but with impact. No yelling, no begging, just undeniable energy. That's what you did. You didn't tell them who you were. You showed them day by day, choice by choice. While they cycled the same fake stories and tired labels you were building quietly, relentlessly. They were addicted to applause. You were committed to progress. That's what really messed them up. You didn't fight for the spotlight. You let your results shine for you. And when the glow hit, it wasn't forced. It was earned. No speech needed, no clout chasing, just presence, real presence. That rare kind of presence that can't be bought, faked, or replicated. Now they're scrambling to rewrite history, trying to slide into spaces they once told you you'd never belong in. Pretending they always knew you'd rise, but the truth is they never believed in you. Not because you lacked value, but because they couldn't see past their own limits. And now, while you live the life they said you'd never have, they're left explaining themselves to themselves. You didn't prove your worth, you became the proof. And now the room is silent. Number 6, you starved their chaos and they choked on the silence. The loudest lie dies fastest when it's ignored by the truth. They threw bait. You brought boundaries. When you stop feeding clowns, the whole circus packs up and disappears. They weren't bold, they were hungry. Starving for attention, for reaction, for anything they could use to drag you into the dirt. So they stirred the pot with lies, gossip, and low-level drama, hoping you'd crack. That was the whole point, not to expose you but to provoke you. Because if they could get a loud reaction, even a small one, they could spin it into a story, paint you as unstable, call you bitter, make themselves the victim while playing innocent. But what did you do? Nothing. And that's what broke them. You didn't throw a fit. You didn't run to social media. You didn't text back. You didn't correct the lie. You didn't even flinch. You saw the game and declined the invitation. You let them act out alone in the dark while you stayed laser-focused on your light. And that silence, that stillness, that calm refusal to dance in their dysfunction, it starved them. Imagine a parasite with no host. That's what you turned them into. Empty, lost, clawing at shadows. They didn't want peace, they wanted fuel, and when you didn't give it, their entire plan collapsed under its own weight. Because demons don't need facts, they need reaction. And when you took that away, they had nothing left to spin. That's what most people don't understand. Silence isn't weakness, it's a power move. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself. You didn't need to clap back because you knew the truth was louder than any lie. And it always finds its way to the surface. And while they tried to keep the fire burning, they forgot one thing. Without oxygen, flames die. You chose not to engage because you understood something sacred. Your peace is not up for auction. Your energy isn't free. You don't throw diamonds at dogs and expect them to see the value. You knew what you carried and you protected it like royalty. Now look, their campaign is quiet. Their tricks have fizzled. Their fake stories fell apart. And you're still rising, still glowing, still untouchable because you didn't feed the demons. You let them starve. Number 7, you held your fire, and they got burned by their own smoke. Silence isn't weakness. It's proof that you don't need noise to cause an earthquake. The loudest flex is walking away from chaos with your peace intact. They thought your silence meant surrender, that you were scared, powerless, defeated. But they couldn't have been more wrong. What they saw as weakness was the kind of strength they'll never possess. The strength to stay composed when everything around you is pushing you to explode. You had every reason to snap. You had the truth, the ammo, the kind of words that could have flipped the entire situation and exposed every player in the mess. But you didn't use them. You didn't swing, you didn't scream. You chose peace over pettiness, and that decision made more noise than any outburst ever could. Most people confuse chaos with power. They think making a scene means you're winning, but what you showed was a higher level of control. The kind that comes from someone who's already outgrown the games being played. You weren't silent because you were weak. You were silent because you were wise. You understood that not every fire needs to be put out. Some just need to burn themselves to ash while you keep walking. Imagine someone throwing everything at you, insults, rumors, manipulation, and you just look at them like they're beneath your energy. That's restraint. That's elegance in the face of madness. You didn't respond because you knew the truth didn't need defending. You knew your reputation wasn't built on public approval, it was built on private discipline. And that's something they'll never understand. They expected fireworks. Instead, they got a mirror. Your silence made them sit with what they did. No distractions, no battles to twist the narrative, no emotional outbursts to hide behind. Just them, their lies, and the echo of your absence. And the longer that silence stretched, the louder it hit. Because deep down, they knew if the roles were reversed, they would have lost control. They would have shattered every relationship, torched every bridge, and dragged everyone into their storm. But you became the calm after it. You didn't just walk away, you left a message behind. I could have destroyed you, but I chose to heal instead. And that haunts them more than rage ever would. Number 8. You became the reflection that ruined their illusion. You didn't expose them with words. You exposed them by existing with integrity. They couldn't fake. When a lie meets a life lived in truth, it shatters without a sound. You didn't drag anyone's name through the mud. You didn't air dirty secrets or run a smear campaign. All you did was stand still, calm, clear, and unapologetically grounded in your truth. And somehow that shook them more than any confrontation ever could. Because when someone is used to spinning stories and manipulating perception, nothing is more threatening than someone who doesn't play along. You didn't need to call them out. You were the call-out. You became the mirror they never wanted to look into. Every time they saw you rise above the chaos, it reminded them of their own low behavior. Every time you stayed calm while they plotted, it reflected just how out of control they really were. Your grace exposed their greed. Your loyalty showed their disloyalty. Your silence highlighted their noise. And the more you kept your head held high, the more their mask started to slip. Imagine trying to paint someone as unstable while they're out here moving like stone, still centered and focused. That's what rattled them. Their lies looked ridiculous next to your composure. Their chaos lost its power next to your peace. They weren't ready for that kind of contrast. They were hoping to drag you into the dirt. Instead, they ended up drowning in their own reflection. You didn't become the enemy. You became the evidence. Every little thing they tried to hide, the envy, the backstabbing, the insecurity came to light simply because you didn't fold. And that's what's got them spiraling now. Not because you hurt them, but because being near you reveals the truth they're terrified to face. They never had control. They never had power. They were never as strong or as smart or as above it all as they pretended to be. You didn't have to fight them. You just had to be you. And that was enough to break the illusion, still rising, still watching them fall apart. All because you became the one thing they couldn't destroy, their own reflection. Number 9. You moved like the universe was recording everything because it was. Some people act right when watched. You acted right when no one clapped. And that's why you're winning in silence. You didn't get even. You stayed aligned. And now the karma they laughed at is knocking on their own door. You handled it all like someone who knew the truth always comes home, even when it takes the long way. While they were moving in secret, whispering, in shadows and laughing like there would never be a cost, you were walking like the air around you was sacred because it was. You understood what they didn't. Nothing is ever really hidden. Not energy, not motives, not intentions, and certainly not the fallout. You could have retaliated. You could have gotten dirty, matched their pettiness, and fed into the storm they created. But you didn't. Not because you couldn't, but because you were aware of something deeper. You weren't thinking about short-term victory. You were thinking about long-term peace. You were thinking about staying aligned with something far more powerful than their gossip or their schemes. You didn't lower your standards for temporary satisfaction. You elevated your soul for permanent protection. They played like there were no rules. You lived like every move mattered. And that's what made you untouchable. You didn't need an audience. You weren't waiting for applause. You knew integrity isn't something you put on like a costume. It's who you are when no one's around. While they were faking goodness for the cameras, you were living truthfully when no one was watching. And now, the script is flipping because the universe doesn't miss anything. The same ones who whispered lies in private are being exposed in public. The same ones who mocked your silence are now stunned by your glow. You didn't scream your way into justice. You let time do the heavy lifting. You let truth reveal itself, like it always does, slowly, perfectly, and without needing your hands involved. You kept your soul clean even when the mud was flying. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Now people look at you differently, not because you made noise, but because you made sense. Because you held your peace when everything inside you wanted to roar. Because you acted like someone who knew the universe keeps receipts. You passed a test they didn't even know they were taking. And now your silence is crowning you louder than any praise ever could. Number 10, you didn't just survive the fire. You rebuilt the blueprint in the flames. They thought you'd come out shattered. Instead, you came out sculpted. What tried to bury you didn't realize you weren't escaping. You were evolving. This wasn't a clean getaway. This wasn't some quick bounce back or lucky break. What you went through could have wrecked you, not just emotionally but spiritually. Most people would have limped out, dragging shame, resentment, and the twisted story others tried to place on them. But not you. You didn't just escape that chaos. You faced it head-on, reshaped it, and walked out carrying something they didn't expect. Power. You didn't wait for the dust to clear before reclaiming your name. You reclaimed it in the smoke. You walked through that fire and let it burn off the old you. The version of you that used to explain too much, shrink too small, or play too safe. That situation wasn't your ending. It was your forge, the place where your next level was born. Imagine someone handed you broken glass hoping you'd bleed, but you collected it and built stained windows from it. That's how you moved. You didn't deny the pain. You turned it into design. You didn't run from what hurt. You mined it for meaning. You sat in the discomfort and asked deeper questions. What is this trying to teach me? What can I take from this that will never leave me again? And those answers, they built the version of you that's now impossible to ignore. That's why your presence hits different now. It's not just what you overcame, it's how you overcame it. You didn't look for sympathy. You found strength. You didn't beg to be seen. You became so clear within yourself that people had no choice but to notice. They can feel it in your energy now. The stillness, the clarity, the unshakable core. Because you didn't just move on. You rebuilt wiser, smarter, cleaner. And the ones who try to define you by your downfall, they're confused because the version of you they tried to leave broken no longer exists. You didn't carry the chaos with you. You turned it into something sacred. You redefined what resilience looks like. And in doing so, you redefined you. You didn't run, you rose. And now every step you take is a reminder. You weren't just tested, you were transformed. Number 11, you let the lie decay and now they're choking on the stench. Lies move fast, but they die ugly. Truth moves slow, but it buries everything fake in silence. You didn't fight fire with fire. You let time be the wind, and it blew their little campfire of gossip into ashes. You knew the game they were playing. It was never about truth. It was about speed, how fast they could poison the air before anyone had time to ask questions. So they moved quickly, whispered lies in rooms you weren't invited into, built a false narrative, and passed it around like a secret menu. The goal was never accuracy. It was attention, but you didn't flinch. You didn't chase down every lie. You didn't try to argue with people who were committed to misunderstanding you because you knew something most never learn. Lies age like milk, not wine. While they were busy twisting the facts, you were sitting still, silent, unshaken. You weren't panicking because you understood the timeline of truth. You knew it always comes back around, not with a bang, but with quiet clarity that dismantles every fake story one crack at a time. And now it's happening. The same people who once judged you are confused. The math ain't mathing anymore. Their version of the story is falling apart and you haven't said a word. Imagine planting the truth like a seed and walking away. No watering, nourishing, just trusting that when the time is right, it'll bloom. And when it does, it'll expose everything that was built on shallow soil. That's what you did, and now the lie is rotten. The characters in their little story can't keep their lines straight. The people who believed them feel embarrassed, and the ones who helped spread the mess, they're slipping out the side door in silence. You never needed to perform. You never needed to clap back. You knew what they didn't. Truth is patient, but never passive. It might show up late, but it always shows up ready. And when it does, it doesn't knock. It breaks the door down. Now they're scrambling while you remain poised. You didn't just let the lie die. You let it rot naturally, perfectly, and without ever breaking your peace. And that's what makes your silence louder than their smear campaign ever was. Number 12, you walked off their stage, and now the spotlight follows you. Anyway, they begged for attention. You built character in silence, and now the echo of your restraint is louder than their entire performance. You weren't silent because you didn't have a story. You were silent because your story didn't need an audience to be real. They wanted a spectacle. They were dying for a scene, one where you'd explain, plead, post long paragraphs, and try to salvage your name like your life depended on public approval. But you knew better. You didn't enter the courtroom of public opinion because you knew it wasn't justice they wanted. It was entertainment, and you weren't about to hand your dignity over for someone else's drama binge. You let them talk. You let them twist. You let them cry, performative tears in spaces you never stepped foot in. You weren't interested in sympathy. You weren't desperate to be liked. You were determined to stay whole. And that kind of strength, it doesn't need defense. It doesn't need applause. It just needs alignment. And you had it. While they scrambled to look innocent, you stayed innocent. While they spun narratives to stay relevant, you stayed silent and relevant anyway. And the more you walked away, the more the room started to realize something wasn't adding up. How does the one not defending themselves seem like the only one still standing in truth? Because deep down, people feel energy. And your energy never lied. You didn't post receipts. You didn't beg to be understood. You didn't package your pain to make it more digestible for others. And that's what made you real. That's what made you untouchable. Because while they were performing pain for clout, you were healing for peace. And healing doesn't need an audience. Imagine a courtroom where everyone's screaming, pointing fingers, playing roles, and you're not even in the building. That's what you did. You walked out of the narrative and became the proof. You didn't escape judgment. You transcended it. And now the spotlight they fought for so badly is burning them alive. The performances are unraveling. The sympathy is fading. And you own the room. Not because you played the game, but because you refused to bow. Number 13, you beat them without becoming them, and that's why they can't sleep. They thought dirt was the only way towing, until you showed up spotless and left with the crown. You didn't bend, break, or beg, and that's the part they'll never understand. From the beginning, they counted you out, not because you lacked skill, but because you refused to stoop. In a world addicted to power plays, mind games, and backdoor deals, your clean hands were seen as a liability. They mistook your principles for passivity, your kindness for softness, your calm for weakness. They believed the only way to rise was to lie, cheat, and walk over people. So when you entered the picture moving differently, they laughed. But you weren't there to fit their mold. You were there to break it. You didn't gossip to gain favor. You didn't play both sides. You didn't sabotage anyone just to climb a little faster. And yet here you are, still standing, still rising, still being talked about. Not because you manipulated your way up, but because you outlasted them all with dignity. That's what's keeping them up at night. You proved that strategy isn't the same as scheming. That timing isn't the same as trickery. That integrity still wins in a world that forgot what it looks like. Imagine walking through a room full of snakes and never stepping on one because you didn't need to. Your presence was enough to make them scatter. That's what you did. You didn't throw shade. You didn't clap back. You didn't play the game. You made the game irrelevant. They were busy drawing battle lines and you were building blueprints for peace. You didn't just take the high road. You made it look powerful. Now they're panicking because you exposed the lie they've been telling themselves for years. That corruption is survival. That kindness is naive. But you flipped all that on its head. You stayed authentic and still ended up at the top. You kept your values and still got the victory. And now the people who swore you'd never last are secretly trying to study your blueprint without admitting it. You didn't fight dirty, you stood tall. And the crown fits even better because you never had to steal it. You didn't just survive their rigged system. You rose above it clean. And as the dust finally settles, one truth stands taller than all the lies, chaos, and betrayal. You didn't just handle a disgusting situation. You transformed through it. You stayed clean in a dirty game. And now even your silence echoes louder than their noise ever could. Your story is proof that restraint is power, and truth always wins, even if it takes time. If this message spoke to your soul, make sure to like, subscribe, drop 777 in the comments, and share this with someone who needs the reminder. You don't have to play dirty to win with power.